All right, we shall carry on. So we are at garbage 4301. It's all yours again, Barb.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the garbage requisition request in 2017 was $313,910. The budget request for 2018, $323,600. I just want to remind you that the discussion on the additional expenses is on the additional request sheet that does need to be moved over for the future tipping charges. Out of the budget, we did do an increase to the municipal membership fee of $3,600, which is the anticipated 2% increase from the Waste Authority. We increased $3,000 to other professional to reflect the contracted services price, and we increased $4,400 for repairs to equipment, and that was a new request to purchase 40 more carts for inventory. Any questions? Carts, the waste carts to put behind your house that gets
the black garbage carts. And that's I think that's a combination of replacements that we get reimbursed for, so it's damaged cart, broken cart, and then also just new builds. So we're seeing, I think we did about 15 or 20 last year of new builds, at least that many.
So how much is a cart if somebody runs over it with their car? Or
$100?
$100, yeah.
$200?
$100. Yeah.
Could you explain the membership fees and professional? What does that consist of?
So the membership fees would be the fees that we pay to Drumheller Waste Association. We get an annual requisition. And the other professional is the fees that we pay to GFL for the service contract. And also in other professional, there's 9,500 provision for spring cleanup contract charges as well.
And the sale? What is the sale of the utility?
It's on your utility bill every month. There's a $2 fee for recycling.
No, what happens? So on everyone's water utility, but there's a $2 per month cost charge for recycling, and that's our contribution to the Solid Waste Association, Drumheller District Solid Waste Association. It goes to subsidize the recycling program that they have. Right?
Yeah, so we collected.
We collected
for the association.
Right.
We don't pay the association that, do we?
Do we charge the Solid Waste Association anything for the use of our land? And the maintenance of the roads or anything like that?
There's a lease agreement that we have with them. Off the top of my head, I don't know what that dollar amount is that we charge them. It's very nominal because, yeah, I honestly I couldn't tell you a good answer on that, of what we charge them. So what we haven't done in the past is we haven't charged them for some of our services that we provide to them, such as payroll, accounting, etc. And now we started charging them. We're starting to charge them this year. So
I would say that would be a really good idea, since the only ones that can single out on the tipping issues are us. So I would I really don't think that's
No, we brought that up to them already with that stuff is changing from years past.
So I have a bit of a question. So when it comes to that commercial tipping fees of $27,000 line item, have we explored possibly increasing that recycling fee that's on the water utility bill every month, rather than having an increase to land taxes?
We haven't done that yet. So what I've said to our executive that sit on, is that I'm not comfortable with that fee, that we actually have that for our residents. And so we have our meeting next Friday afternoon with the executive, and I'm bringing that up as well as a number of other issues that we just have, because in my opinion, as we talked about before, we have communities that have the population of the folks in this room, and yet they get an equal say, and they have no commercial business at all, so they get an equal say. So I just want everyone to understand that it's a much bigger impact to us than it is to some of the very small communities, like Acme as an example.
More than that, if we were to add to the recycling fee, that is going the wrong direction on who should be paying. This is an increase in commercial charges, and so, well, if the fee is going to be charged, if we can't see some way through for that to change, we talked about a multi-year campaign to eventually pass the full cost of those expenses on to the people who are incurring them. So again, we're not subsidizing business, right?
And we've already talked to GFL about how they would roll that in over a multi-year period if that was going to be the case to do it. So, so fundamentally, maybe this isn't a good happy answer, but I believe that the businesses should pay for the disposal, because if you compare, the pillow factory versus the sausage factory that have garbage that gets picked up, the latter has far more waste that they produce, far more weight, yet neither of them have any idea what their costs are exactly the same, because they don't pay for disposal, because all of that would be subsidized by everybody. So I agree. I just don't agree with how it was brought in very quickly at the end of the year by the association. So
Then let's hope those conversations are successful.
yeah.
I think it's just an easy thing to identify as well. You can actually see the color, the green bin. But when it goes to an MD with the same number of people as our town, you can't really go out there and differentiate commercial garbage for somebody running a business on a farm or something like that. That's not fair.
But as well as if we're supplying all the land and stuff, that'd be interesting to see what we're getting on that, because that might have a big impact here. If we're paying our share plus we're supplying all the property, worth looking into.
I know we have the numbers. I just don't remember them off the top of my head. So.
Okay. So we move on to FCSS 5101 function. So the budget request in this particular function has mostly all the revenue, and then the sub functions down below have most of the expenses. So in this area, so if I could just talk, actually, I'm just going to talk overall about FCSS, and Paul, please jump in whenever I need to be corrected. So FCSS is a program that's funded in partnership with the government, and the grant that we get, the town is, whatever the total cost of the program is, the town's expected to put 20% in, and we have a limited grant amount of $234,000, and then the town's portion is about $60,000 that we're required to contribute, right? Okay. So in this case, then this budget again, $104,108,745 revenue for 2018. We increased travel expenses by $800. We decreased advertising $1,830. Increased municipal membership fee request $785, increased printing and binding expense $800, and we reduced the education request by $1,300.
Paul, if you wouldn't mind, this is a great place for 30 seconds on which programs we'll be talking about.
Yes.
Okay. So as Barb mentioned in the intro there, you have the umbrella of funds that are received by the province for which show up in FCSS admin. That's the 5101 category. And then from there, you start to see, in addition to the administrative costs of running the programs, you get specific to senior services, and then you get into some of the other things along the line, seasonal FCSS, which includes programs that we run in the schools like Roots of Empathy, also covering a portion of the cost for the production of the activity guide, which is a partnership with Drumheller Further Education.
Is the Camp BCF under that one, like the summer program, summer fun program?
No, actually, it was at a time, and I think we moved that into standalone within the BCF programming, because it was strictly a recreation program, and we targeted for cost recovery. So there was a time there, and then in fact, when you get into the BCF portion of the budget, you'll find that there have been some ups and downs for delivery of that program over time. Even though our target was cost recovery, it's very dependent on what volume of registration we get for those. So as we go through, you've got Roots of Empathy, which is essentially you bring in a very young child into a classroom setting, and kids are given interaction with that child to connect with, the importance of being empathetic towards children, and using that as a way to partner with the schools. You also have different things like family fun events, which we partner with other groups for, and in addition to Parent Link and Alberta Health for different programs that support. In this case, there'd be preschool aged programming that's focused on Drumheller and area. There's some awards there that are identified, Leaders of Tomorrow. Some of those actually come through some legacy funding that is connected to the ID of Badlands and post-amalgamation. There was actually I guess you would call it like a grant reserve put aside that's covered there. Yeah, so it's a donation that was put there through Idea Badlands. And then you have our after school care programs, which provide capacity at this point for up to 19 children at Green Tree School. We're working these days to increase the number of kids that can participate in that program. And our focus is to try and get as many people who qualify for subsidies into that program as possible. So there is a kind of a focus on people that qualify based on lower income criteria that go through that process. It's not, and then beyond that, if there is spots available, it's on a first come first served basis. So that's how we provide the service there. This is the first time that we've seen any costs for rent for before and after school care. Green Tree School through Golden Hills was reviewing their contracts and put us in a position to say that they wanted us to pay for a monthly rent. So the value that you see there is $1,000 for the year, which is a new cost that we haven't had in the past. From there, it splinters out into different programs that are not, there are some that are FCSS related, but there are different programs that come into play. It's referred to as non-FCSS CBI, but we do have some printing and binding costs that you see just wrapping up in under 5121. So we pay for community photocopying at the library, and we're working with the library to get better controls on the use of the photocopier there. I would suggest in our social media and email world, the demand for photocopying probably shouldn't be as high as it has been, but I suspect that we've got certain user groups that are listed that like to come in and get their copies because they know that it's there for free, and so we're tracking and monitoring to make sure that that's done with a little more oversight. Of course, sort of wrapping up FCSS direct funding are the family resource workers that are resident in Green Tree School, DVSS, and St. Anthony's School. By no means does that reflect the full cost that those programs are putting on the ground with the schools. The amount that we provide in each case has remained static over time, much the same way as the province has given us a static amount of funding to disperse our FCSS dollars in the last, 40 years. I believe FCSS started in Alberta in the late 1960s. Then we move into non-FCSS programs. It's another contract that's funded through Alberta Child and Family Services, and we're funded through that program called the Community Building Initiative. It's another scenario where we've seen some cost creep over time, and we haven't seen any matching contributions from the province. So when we started out with that program, we started with a combination. So there's actually a position where we were able to create a position through the town of Drumheller, our community services coordinator position, which was 80% funded through FCSS, 20% through FCSS, 80% through the Community Building Initiative funds that you see there, which is separate from the FCSS budget, but under the same more or less operational umbrella. And so we're seeing some of the creeping there where the amount that we receive from the province doesn't come close to the cost of offering the same FTE equivalent that we would have had 10 years ago, as an example. So we're in a position, and I think you see it on your request in front of you there, that in order to cover off the differential in costs, there's $13,775 that are identified that we would need to cover to preserve that full-time position for the community services coordinator position.
So, because if we could just interrupt for there for a second. CBI grant funding does not require any contribution from the community. We're FCSS, so when we're talking FCSS and you look at the budget, every function that starts with a 5-1 number falls under FCSS function, and the net of those functions should equate to the 20% of our requirement. CBI did not require any contribution on behalf of the municipality. So there's partly, I just wanted to provide that clarity. So in order to top it up, like Paul said, there's an ask, but CBI also is required to provide services to Starland County, correct? So it's important to make that connection as well, that that position supports not just the town of Drumheller.
A good deal of the activities for that position take place in Drumheller, where we entertain residents of Starland County in our facilities in order to deliver those programs. There is some outreach as well, where the program can go to Munson Moore and Delia and offer programs specific to those communities, and we've done that in the past. It makes it very difficult for us to do that as our budget starts to shrink and we don't have any contributions from anybody else in order to top up the position for the community services coordinator. And that kind of covers it for FCSS and the community services social, I guess you'd say it's social programming for the town of Drumheller.
So sorry, so as the CBI budget is right now, it reflects a 0.57 equivalent, right? And 0.2 is funded by FCSS, so that additional ask is to make up that somewhat percent difference. Yeah.
So just further to the family resource worker position, an example at DVSS, the town pays for 50% of the position. The school board is supposed to pay for 50% of the position, but they decided not to. So they were paying for 30% of the position, and so the school itself picked up the other 20%. So there's still a full-time worker there, even though it's shared costs. I'm very disappointed in the school division.
Paul, on your insurance there, seeing insurance is going up. I've seen it go up a little bit over the other departments, but that one's doubled. Is there a reason in 2017 from 16 that it doubled? Almost doubled.
Yeah, I think probably the best thing to explain that is that there was an increase in the number of events that were happening. So the Sparks Fair, as an example, was an event that required additional insurance. There's other activities that have taken place there that have required, as we live in I'll look at Lisa when I say that, as we live in an insurance focused world where more and more insurance is required in order to offset the risk that we undertake to deliver different programs. It's just part of the reality of where we're at.
Thank you. And your phone doubled?
Yeah, I think what happened is we had a replacement of a phone in 2017.
Going back to insurance, just an aside, do we require events that are booking the BCF to have their own insurance?
Yes, they
So
have
like
to name
the
us
Sparks Fair.
was ours.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
But if it's an outside event, they have to have their own insurance?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, and the other one just that added to the insurance was the actual Festival of Lights. So we needed insurance for the fire pits. So insurance without the fire pits was very minimal, almost non-existent. Add the fire pits and it jumped substantially. So yeah, and one of the things just that, and we've Greg and Barb and I have talked about this, that we want to look at insurance this year as part of our overall, does this make sense? Are we actually getting the right insurance? Are we paying too little? Are we paying too much? Are we using the right provider? So because it's a big number globally. It's a big number. Like I want to say it's $185,000 a year for insurance we pay for the corporation. So that's a lot.
I would suggest that maybe the telephone system would be another one to review as well.
Yeah.
Are we through AUMA or AMSC for
It's through AUMA, yeah.
AMSC?
Yeah. Yeah, AMSC. It's and we looked at, I think Greg and Ray looked a couple years ago at, what was the name of that company? Jubilee, which was tends to do a lot of smaller municipalities or counties, but perhaps had some pretty good rates. So, but I think it just kind of fell by the wayside with other stuff. So we want to resurrect that to see whether or not we're actually looking at other options.
So how big does a municipality or an order of government have to be to not have insurance? Because I mean, the provincial government doesn't have insurance. The federal government doesn't have insurance.
They're self-insured.
City of Calgary doesn't have insurance.
CN didn't have insurance either, and look what happened. Yeah, if you've got enough money in the bank account that, as Daryl said, you can self-insure yourself, then most of those corporations don't carry insurance. But like a municipality, some of those claims are hundreds of millions of dollars. So, the cost is well worth it in the long run.
And included in the number I just gave you, that includes our vehicles, property insurance, risk insurance, etc. So it's more than just simply one item. So.
So are we still going function by function on 51 then? Okay. Okay. So 5103 is the first function there under the FCSS umbrella then, and 2017's budget request was 94,485. Budget for 2018 request is 89,300. Some of it was, most of it actually was all allocation to salary expense. No questions? 5105 seasonal FCSS. 2017 budget request 26,620. 2018 budget request $23,065. There was a reduction in printing and binding expense of $2,045, and that was a 25% of the cost is allocated to recreation admin for Aquaplex and BCF listings. It just wasn't being allocated properly before.
The only one here that doesn't make sense to me in terms, and I'm just curious if it's a bill doesn't come in until December, is the 4,100 we're setting aside for education, line 453. There was $324 expensed, but there was 4,100 the year before.
Yeah,
No.
I can speak to that. What happened in that program is we basically cycled through the instructors for that program and lost. Usually we would have 2 or 3 that would be available. All of them seemed to leave the program due to retirement or other reasons or relocation. So we had to spend more money on education to get them certified and qualified to deliver the program, and that meant sending them out to Red Deer or Calgary to get the training that was required.
Makes sense, Paul. So the quick follow up then was 4,100 the aberration, but yet we've continued to budget for it, or what's an appropriate figure for education for that, for seasonal FCSS programs?
Yeah, I think specific to that program, that $1,800 per instructor made sense, and then anticipating that there might be some rollover.
That's how much, 1,800 per.
1,800
Wouldn't take
per.
much to spend 4,100 then, would it?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Paul, just if I could too, was this year the year that the program was temporarily had been suspended because of whooping cough, and so there wasn't as much?
Yeah, that it wasn't this year, but it was actually, I believe, in 2016, where the program was halted because of the whooping cough issue in schools, and they didn't want to introduce young children into an environment where they could get infected, and so they had to suspend the program that year. And then we didn't spend as much, and that sort of led, I think, in part to turnover in the qualified staff.
So my next question, one question on that is, so insurance, you have an actual of a 1,000 for 2017, but you got nothing for 2018. Was there an event that you're not scheduling for the seasonal FCSS?
Good question. I'm not exactly sure why that might have been actually just a coding error or something connected to another event.
Or was that the Sparks Fair?
That's what I'm saying. Is I think it could have been
a one-time.
Could have been the
event.
one-time.
Actually, could have been the
Sparks
insurance
Fair.
for Sparks Fair.
Yeah.
So
that would make sense
it was a
because
Sparks Fair.
I think that's pretty close to what the value of that was.
But we
Well,
are
you're planning
anticipating
on-
renewing that event,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So
Yeah.
2018, we should be budgeting appropriately for that.
And that's possible. I think, as Daryl had mentioned earlier, if we're going to do a review of our insurance for the year, that might fall under that umbrella as well.
And I think I'm trying to recall it, we did a couple of higher or more volatile events that require a higher premium that I don't think, if I remember April saying we may not repeat it, or we also or we're asking the actual proponent that's providing the work to do their own insurance. Because I think what we did last in 2017 was actually insure some companies that may have already had insurance, and so smarter now than we were when I guess this came about. So I think we're not doing that, and the insurance for that event is just kind of rolled up into the general admin one that was in before the seniors. So. For just as an instance, or as an aside, just when we did the bouncy castle, or whatever you call it, that thing, like, so the insurance for that was, I think, $1,000 for the day or something like that. And then in going back and asking them, so what do you do for insurance? The person that provided it to us said, well, I carry my own insurance, and I usually name the community as the insured if that's what they want us to do. And so, of course, that's what we want them to do. So, yeah.
And what's that project specify?
So in the project budget is the honorarium for Roots of Empathy. Family fun, so $1,250 for honorarium for those participants, $3,500 for family fun events, $2,000 for the volunteer appreciation event, and $600 for Leaders of Tomorrow recognition is the project budget. Sure, $2,000 was for the volunteer appreciation, and $600 for Leaders of Tomorrow recognition. $1,250 for honorarium for Roots of Empathy participants, and then $3,500 for 10 family fun events. And they do this family fun events in partnership with Alberta Health, Parent Link, Family Services Literacy, it says.
Are we talking about line 455?
Yes.
That doesn't add up to 12.
7350 is the number I have.
Oh, okay. So it would. Sorry, I thought you were counting. That's what you budgeted for.
Yes,
You're
that's
not.
the budget.
You're not allocate. You're not telling us what we spent
No.
the 12 on. Okay,
No.
thank you.
That's a year-to-date number. Yeah, when I do my analysis, we'll be finding that. Okay, any more questions? Moving on to after school care, 5106. Again, it's an FCSS umbrella. Budget $25,140 in 2017. Budget request $24,575 in 2018. Major changes: we increased the revenue for after school care fees by $6,500. We increased travel. That's a new item, but that's to pay for kilometers for employees of that function. And other general services, $1,000 increase, and that's the provision for the Green Tree School facility rental cost. Is a new item. Yes.
Can you elaborate on the travel and subsistence a little bit?
I think it's mostly just reflects local travel for staff. And it can also connect to education. So if there's staff that are going out of town for a course, then the travel budget would be covered under that.
For after school care?
Yep.
Do we have a fee assistance program for this program?
Yeah, we don't do a municipal fee assistance program. However, a good number of those that are in the program qualify for the provincial subsidy. In some cases, that covers 100% of their cost to be in the program.
Okay, so these, how many employees then do you typically have at that?
We have what would be 1.2 staff, depending on what our ratio is. So our ratio scales. Typically, we are required under our license to have a minimum of 2 staff in the program. One staff member can watch up to 15 children, and then after that number 15 is hit, you're required to carry an extra person to meet the licensing requirements. One of the things we're looking into is an accredited facility, which provides a higher standard of care. However, with a higher standard of care always comes with higher costs. There are some benefits to getting to an accredited state, and that would be there are incentives that the province can provide in terms of the cost of subsidization for qualified staff. However, in addition to that, there's an additional cost to providing training for staff to reach different qualification levels. So currently we have level 1 and level 2 daycare providers under that program and are required under the license. We could also have additional staff that were hired in order to meet accreditation at a higher standard, so more level 2 staff that would be employed. Essentially now it's a program that you can take and there's no cost, but if you up your qualification, then there's more cost for the educational piece in order to meet the higher standards. So yeah.
So with the education, once you get your level 1 and 2, do you have it or do you have to refresh?
I think it's good as long as you're practicing, and then you have to, you're subject to licensing inspections. Usually there's 2 or 3 license inspections that occur every year. So we do deal with Child and Family Services licensing branch, and they walk through our program every year and provide us with feedback to meet their requirements.
And the 1 full-time and 2 part-time staff that we have we had them continuously, or do we have a big turnaround that needs more education in the budget?
Well, it's actually because it's a split shift program. We offer the service in the morning from 7 a.m. till 8:30 a.m. and then in the afternoon from 3:15 p.m. to it's roughly about 5:45 p.m. Because of that, it's actually a part-time position for the person that's there, a permanent part-time position that's there. Additionally, we have part-time staff, and we've had a few new part-time staff that have participated there. But again, there's also that .2 position from the community services coordinator that steps in and then covers off the ratio for us in the afternoons. We don't typically see higher demand in the mornings for the program, but we do after school till usually around 5 to 5:30 is our peak, and then we start to see the numbers drop, and then we meet our ratio, and we can sort of peel back with staffing. One of the things about that, however, is that we do have fixed costs associated with calling in unionized staff, so that we pay a minimum 3 hours to cover off on a shift, and that's just something we can't escape.
You'd have to pay any staff that. I think it would, unless they're under 15 years old, you have to pay them for 3 hours. I think one of the things to keep in mind, everybody, is this is a poverty reduction strategy. When we have a good chunk of the people here qualifying for additional subsidy for the costs, it means that this is allowing low-income earners to go to work. And even though it might seem like a lot of money, when you break it down at 19 kids for $24,000 a year in additional subsidy, for up to 3 hours of care a day, it's $6 per kid per day, roughly, if there's 20 school days in a month. So we're not spending a fortune on this project. It may feel like it, but it's not, and it is absolutely a poverty reduction strategy.
And you'll notice actually the costs. We do recover a good portion of the costs of the program as well. So there are costs, but there is also a revenue stream there that we've been pretty successful in recovering. And the province is actually a really good client to have. When you have those that qualify for subsidies, you know you're going to get paid when they're on those subsidies. That makes it kind of a preferred scenario to be in.
So just on that note, although we don't actually offer the subsidies, we do facilitate it. We do the billing and the collection from the government. Okay. So the next one is 5121 in direct programs. Again, it's an FCSS program. Budget for 2017, $34,810. Budget request for 2018, $34,065. And we did a $745 reduction. What's my note there? Now I'm confused on my note. Sorry, to printing and binding. I think my comment might be something old from last year. I just failed to. Does that make sense?
But this is always the one that throws me is in the what is this? Because if we're offering $10,000 a year worth of free photocopying, if that's where this one comes, Paul, that is awful damn nice of us.
Just 2, 2, 3. So I think there's no, sorry. So part of that, yes, is copier usage. So in that printing and binding budget, we have $8,000 for copier usage. We have $1,000 for criminal record checks for volunteer associations, and then $1,000 budget for photocopying of community organizations.
Oh,
So
okay.
FCSS itself has an $8,000.
I see. Okay, thanks for the clarification. And who's getting the grant?
Which grant? Oh, sorry. That is the family resource workers that we were talking about.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification. I never can remember what indirect stands for.
Any more questions?
So that that printing is just for FCSS, that 8,000?
8,000 is of their printing, and then $1,000
So what did
for
they
community.
print off so much that we would spend $8,000 in printing? Paul? Like that's pretty wild in today's world of technology.
I think
That's
I'm
a
not sure if
budget.
that's captured already above in some of the earlier sections, but there was the section on the activity guide where we offset some of those costs. That seems high to me. So yeah, I think there's probably some commingling of that expense with the community photocopying as well from the library. Because there's probably 30 plus organizations that are listed.
At 10 cents a copy, it's hard for me to imagine they only run through $1,000. So
And we're actually just looking at this right now because you looked at year to date, and then we were just looking at this today. And we haven't resolved it yet, but see, the year to date is only $673. So we're trying to find out where did those costs go that got as part of our year end analysis.
Perfect.
So the next one is the CBI program, which we talked about. So it's zero budget request last year, zero budget request again this year, but with that note below that the budget does only fund 0.57 of an FTE, as opposed to 80% last year.
Barb, do you have a copy of that one that was revised? Lisa didn't get that one. Or you-
Oh no. So the next function after that is 5601 cemetery. So 2017 budget request 27,360. 2018 budget request 36,450. Have to take out the global adjustments. We did increase sale of land by $1,000. We increased other professional requests by $600, and I have a note. It was new expense for gopher control, and increased other general supplies $1,000, and that's for topsoil primarily.
Barb, there was quite a jump in salaries there, like $9,000 from 2016, I guess. Never mind. Yeah.
But I think a good explanation for that, though, Fred, is that so we We opened up a new phase, some phases at the back, the south part. So there's been a lot more work from our staff at making it ready and clean and saleable, I guess. So we've been doing more work back there in the.
And I'd love to give them credit because they do a fine job. Thank you, because I go visit. So as well on that vein, there's other general services. That's where you said that the
Other general supplies, the budget was
no more the services.
so other
Because the
general,
actual is 3771, but the budget's 9250. Is that where you said the upkeep of the new?
Thank you.
So last year, excuse me. So last year's actual is didn't include things like some ditching and tree pruning. So there's some things we do every year, some things that we said we weren't going to do last year when we were looking for money in other areas. So that includes columbarium expenses, contracts spraying for weeds out there. We didn't do it. Of course, we didn't do any weeds last summer. Like we didn't do any weed control anywhere. So there's a reduction there. And then just some of the ditch. We didn't do any ditch cleaning, but we put in a budget of $2,000 roughly a year to kind of clean out, just to make sure that we don't flood the area at all. So.
Any more questions? No? Okay, municipal planning 6101. Budget 2017, 107,500. Budget 2018, 110,725. This is our requisition fees to Palliser Regional Services Planning Commission, and it just reflects an estimated 2% in the requisition amount year over year.
So on this one in particular, I know what Palliser pays their staff. Is this an example of a cost to the town of Drumheller in being a great regional partner where we could employ a planner for less money than this? Would one planner be able to do the job for the town of Drumheller, or would we be looking at something else?
I think when you look at Palliser, it's not just the planner aspect; it's some of the other services that come with that. So they've got their fixed wing GIS services and some of the support projects that we're working with them on that.
Oh, okay.
Additionally, I think there's the relationship that we have running the safety codes office through the town of Drumheller as well. So there's that partnership piece. Do I think that we need planning in the mix for us to move forward as an organization? Absolutely. I think there'd be some analysis on how we'd have to go about doing that. But yeah, I think that number that you see there, it covers, I guess if you're going to look at a contract type arrangement for planning, it'd probably be what we would spend. And I think you could also compare it to sort of what our costs are for various other professional services as well throughout the year. It's not a great number. I'm not going to say I love that number, because it does kind of get you in a position where you want to have that debate. And I don't think that debate's necessarily a bad thing.
But it's, as far as can we do this in-house more cost effectively, you think, no, we're getting value for our money?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I think there's value in being part of that organization. Yeah, we'd always like to see more, but their resources are limited.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It might be interesting to do a comparison between kind of like-sized communities. Do they have their own municipal planner, or do they subscribe to an organization such as this? Like, what does Lacombe do? what does Brooks do? What, you know what I'm saying? That might be an interesting research. Yeah.
If I could too, I do believe there's some other factors being founding members of the Palliser Regional Services Commission that may negatively affect us if we were to depart from that service. That would cost us, that would have to be looked at as well.
Okay. Yeah, certainly not suggesting a speedy anything like. Just want to make sure we're feeling like we get value for what we're paying, because anyway, said my piece.
On to the next one, economic development. This is a big topic. So, prior year's budget, $173,235. 2018 budget, $129,470. So the changes that were made, the conditional grant was eliminated, $10,000 of revenue. That was the CARES grant. An increase to convention and registration, $2,310. Increase to travel substance, $1,800. Increase to, actually, it says it's an increase to advertising and promo, but it was just really a reallocation from projects. So it's education increased $2,750. Other general services was decreased $60,000. That was the additional position for the economic development officer assistance. And then project was reduced $26,900. 17 of that was reallocated up to advertising and promo. And then there was the provision for the matching $10,000 grant for the CARES grant that was eliminated. And of course, consideration for that 60,000 ECDEV is listed on the new additional request. Well, it actually hasn't been populated in dollar value there yet, but it's for consideration later. Yeah, that 60,000 has to be added in there because it wasn't actually given a number yet. Any other questions? Or any questions? I guess I haven't had any.
Yeah, just clarify that advertising promotion. You said that was a reallocation.
Sure. So under last year's budget, under 295, which is projects, I just got to find it here myself. So there was 17,000 under projects that was budgeted, called Move to and Invest in Drumheller campaign. And that 17,000 was reallocated from projects up into advertising budget. So it's not really a new ask, it's just been put into advertising instead of projects.
And then, so for the contracted economic development officer, possible position at 60,000, we, on top of that, would be paying for the economic development office certification for another employee under the education portfolio.
The education is related to our development officer and mostly, so I'll tell you, in the education budget there's $1,500 for education development training for economic development officer, and then another $1,250 because I believe she's trying to obtain her EDO certification. And then there's $1,500 that's been budgeted for council and board ECDEV training.
Okay, so she's moving towards the EDO role, but we also are budgeting for a second EDO position. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, but that's contract, so we wouldn't be investing necessarily in their skill development.
Not yet.
Right. Yeah. I know what you're saying.
Okay.
I'm missing something, sorry.
But no more money.
Just me going, it seems like a double. Like we're contracting somebody for 60,000 for that skill set, and yet we're educating another member for that skill set that we're purchasing. If that clarifies what I was getting at.
I think so the way I see it is you're hiring an expert as a contracted person which at the same time you're trying to develop the existing staff to become that expert through training and certification, and also absorption guidance under the expert that you're contracted with. Right? So that the goal is that you're not spending $60,000 in 19 and 20. That you actually have now taken that EDO, the person we have, and actually taken them and created that expert from them.
Understood, except then you've got a whole nother communication branch that one has to budget for if you're moving that one role more towards an EDO. Correct?
Yeah. Well, you don't have to. Yeah, except in our case, what we wouldn't have a net new or additional staff to do communication. It would just be reallocation of some of our existing resources. So.
Just so that 60,000 that you were talking about is not in the budget. That's on the ask side. Okay, just so you understood that. Okay. Are we good? Any other questions? Okay. Valley Bus. Did I miss something? No. Okay, so 2017 budget request $75,530. 2018 budget request $77,020. There was a slight decrease in repairs to equipment of $2,000 and an increase to the Valley Bus Society grant of $1,520. I'm not sure has that been finalized yet. Have we actually received a formal requisition? I think at the time I prepared budget, I just assumed a 2% increase.
Right, and I think that we haven't received a formal request from them. I believe the board meets in February 14th, actually. So then I'm sure they would love to send something right after Valentine's Day. So, and I think they were anticipating a 2% as well. Yeah.
So in regards to the decrease in repairs, was that as a result of them utilizing town staff to repair and maintain vehicles rather than an outside source?
Yeah, a combination of reduction because of town staff or the town services doing it. Plus, we did get a new bus, or they did get a new bus last year, and got rid of an old bus that did have higher than average repairs. So, but there have been. So I think that they've been satisfied with the costs we've charged them this year for our services. But they have had a few more repairs on a couple of their buses than they've had in the past as well.
So the announcement that we had about the increased bus service, how is that going to affect the budget? Like we're going to have more buses running more often, and anticipating people will use them, obviously. But I'm just wondering if that.
Yeah, well, those costs are worked into their budget that they have to approve and present, which at the end of the day may create a requisition to us, which is the 2% that we're anticipating.
Lisa, if I could just go back to your question, the salaries decreased repairs decreased because last year we had 4,000 all in repairs and 0 in salaries, and it's a combination of both. So we just allocated 2,000 to salaries and 2,000.
Well, that's a good thing because I know prior council, one of their concerns was that they should be utilizing town services more so than outside services. So that's good to see.
Yeah. On to tourism, 6204, budget 2017, 123,225, budget for 2018, 110,985. So we increased advertising revenue by $1,000, and the budget reflects a $10,000 decrease to travel Drumheller. So again, when the budget was done, it was basically on prior council's desire to decrease that budget annually. So that's how it's reflected now. I'm not sure if there'll be any further direction in that category.
they did come to council and ask for 30. Anybody? Yeah. Anybody have the political will to talk about their ask versus what we're doing?
Sure. Start up.
I think it's appropriate. I'm already on the record of having real concerns with organizational culture that believes that someone else is always responsible for the operating costs of their organization, other than the people who are set up to benefit the most directly in the industry. They feel very strongly that, based on other jurisdictions, that municipal support is appropriate. But I know that when we closed off certainly the ideal hope was from the business license bylaw that ultimately did not work out. That too was intended to transition off of taxpayer support, and even then I think we had a disconnect about whether or not they understood that all the way through. And so I'm comfortable with this level of funding. I'm comfortable that it continues to decrease. At the same time, I think we ought to be prepared for the fact that that will not be received very well.
So I have a question for Jay, or for you guys then. So when you guys did decide to do that, to decrease, what did the public, what was your feel from everybody else, or was it just super negative from them?
It would be restricted to the members of Travel Drumheller alone. There is no hue and cry, to my experience, from the general public. On the contrary, the general public, I think, sides with my argument that the operational costs of the organization make sense to be borne, as well as the marketing expenses of the people in the industry most likely to benefit the most directly. Now, of course, we all know there are economic development spin-offs, or else we wouldn't have a line item and an entire business unit for tourism, right? I mean, we understand the impact here, and they do make their case is quite clear. I know that from the beginning our intention was to increase our was to expect self-sufficiency at some point, and we will not achieve that unless we were to decrease our contribution.
Yeah, and I think we understand their argument, as you say, that tourism benefits everybody in the valley. Therefore, the town's support is worthwhile, and like anything, it's not an expense; it's an investment. But that being said, I have real problems with the idea that they go to businesses and say, give us $1,000, and we will spend every cent of that $1,000 on advertising and marketing for you. That just absolutely is not a good business model. I mean, you have to have some of that aside for your administration expenses. Well, of course, every business is going to say, so if I give you $1,000, you'll spend it all on advert. Well, that's an absolute no-brainer for them, but it's certainly not sustainable for the organization. So, I would love for them to come back to us and say, next year we're going to spend $900 of that $1,000 they gave us on advertising, and we're going to spend $100 on supporting our organization. And then I might support even funding them more, if they need more money. But as it stands right now, I think we are doing the right thing by going to the $20,000 for next year.
I would tend to agree, and I think that by lowering that, it makes them more accountable and perhaps looking in further ways for efficiencies and trying to buy that buy-in from the other organizations that are going to benefit from it the most. I have heard from the public that they didn't want to see their taxpayer dollars going to what they perceive as a special interest group. It's a fair enough comment, but at the same time, I'm trying to see the greater good. It is for community of Drumheller. So even at the $20,000 level or limit, I'm comfortable with that. I think that still is enough to give them the step up they need to continue functioning for 2018.
All we do is support special interest groups, curlers, swimmers, pickleball players. That we are in the business of supporting special interest groups. So, yeah.
I just have a question, Paul. What's the Chamber of Commerce agreement?
The Chamber of Commerce agreement is a memo of agreement that we renew each year for providing tourism information services at the world's largest dinosaur, the Visitor Information Center. So that covers their operational costs for delivering information services. In the past, they would have also fielded phone calls and inquiries through a 1-800 number and responded to email that's tourism specific.
So I see like that's 47,000. Is that good value? It's a question. I don't know the answer to that. Is that good value, or is that something that we would look, if we're looking for places to cut, would we say you might want to look at that, because we don't show a decrease there year over year. We're showing an increase. So
I think that's totally up to council to decide whether or not they think that's an accurate value. I mean, you've certainly seen presentations from the chamber and the services that they deliver, and they always identify the Visitor Information Center as a sinking cost for them. But it's debatable.
No, it is. That's what I've seen the numbers in their eyes. It is a cost to run that VIC. So, I mean, can we run it for less, or we almost need to have a VIC of some sort?
Without question, we absolutely would need to provide that level. I mean, and doing it with union staff would be more expensive than doing it with contract labor, which is what they use almost exclusively. But I think what we have to remember is that's not the cost of running the VIC. That's our contribution to the VIC. I think the overall cost of running the VIC would be much closer to double that figure, just with the sheer volume. I mean, there must be at least 2 to 3 staff on rotating shifts every day of the year. Yeah.
Well, I know that for not every day, because for instance, today when we were at a meeting, they're closed Tuesdays and Wednesdays all winter.
Oh, okay.
So, but there was no question in the summertime they were very busy there. And I guess all I'm asking is maybe we have to do a bit more work to bring back to council to say, what are we getting for that 47? Because maybe it's a great deal. Maybe it's, maybe we want to look at that a bit. So
I know when I posed a similar question, because of course the support of that building is, when I posed it as, but you don't lose money on it because you don't pay for the building you're in. Their argument back was, well, when we look at it, that it's a fair trade-off, that they don't pay rent, but their contribution to operating the VIC is significant. Just advocating their position, not mine. But at the same time, I'm not sure that we could operate a visitor information center for $47,000.
Not the hours that we're expecting them to run it, because we have designated hours according to them that they're required to stay open.
At the same time, though, it is a fair question, because every time it comes up with their business model, not a member, so somebody who is, will have to speak to it. I mean, they do choose to operate as a benevolent society with the revenue that they generate out of the attraction and the gift shop, and so it's a charity, right? They put money back into the community, but don't pay rent for the building they're in. That's the agreement we have. So whether or not we want to revisit it is totally appropriate. Yeah.
And just curious, whose salaries do we have? We don't have a tourism department here. So where do those salaries get allocated from?
is it?
It's a
I
partial
believe a
allocation.
it would
portion
have
of
been-
Julia goes in there.
Yeah, it
so
would have been a breakdown portion of the economic development officer actually traces back to tourism. It was at one time originally referred to as the Economic Development and Tourism Department. And then with the creation of Travel Drumheller, that function follows along and she does sit on that board. So there's activity that is tourism specific, but whether or not that ratio is currently accurate is another question.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Barb, but just remember when we're looking at salaries, so the last one was economic development. That number doesn't reflect the economic development officer's pay. It reflects a portion of that. It reflects a portion of the director of community services. It would reflect a portion of the CAO. It would of the admin staff. So there's actually several people in almost every salary line, not just the one we can think of who wears that name. Right.
Right, correct. Any further questions on tourism? Okay, subdivision 6601, budget for 2017, 16,145. Budget request for 2018, 14,185. Was a reduction in the interest and debenture for the Hillsview subdivision. So most of the costs, any costs that would be incurred, are primarily, other than interest, is all related to land sale. Any questions there? Land? Yes?
So we are anticipating selling $350,000 worth of
I
land.
think I budgeted like 6 lots because technically we do have an agreement with Stevenson Homes to purchase a number of lots each year. Out of that subdivision, they had committed to so many lots and it was supposed to be phased in. So I think I budgeted for 5 lots to be sold each year. 7 times 5, 70,000. 7 times 5 is 35. Yeah.
What would it take to what would happen to the budget if we had a realtor in there trying to sell the lots?
Sure. It would just increase the cost of goods sold by the commission charged by the realtor.
I know where he's going. You want to be out of the business of real estate. Maybe then those lots will move quicker.
Well, I guess the one comment would be that, and I can speak for myself, that when we came to town to look for some place to live, our real estate agent took us to those lots. Like that was probably the second or third place. So there's nothing stopping a real estate agent from selling the lot. Like if the agent wants to negotiate with the town for their slice of commission, they're well able to do that. They're just not doing that. So like they're just, because either the people are going right to the builder when it says Stevenson Homes right on there, or they're looking at other properties. So
I've been told by realtors that the town's unwilling to enter that kind of agreement.
I think that's something we would entertain. Yep. And I think that's also would apply to our industrial land as well.
I think it's something we should jump on a big cart with and get out there and advertise that.
So I can speak on regards to the lots that are reserved for Stevenson Home as part of the subdivision agreement. We have traded lots, so he had a realtor representing him, and in for sure one occasion the party was interested in one of our lots for sale, and we just sold it as a trade to them, so they know they have access to all those lots too. Any more questions? We're good?
Do you want to take a 5-minute break? It seems like people are unsettled here for a minute. Okay, 5 minutes.